Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
Going great. Finally set up professionally here. I got my mic stand rocking and rolling, so all you listeners can actually hear my voice a lot better. And middle of the work week, and I'm excited. I'm working on systems, diving into my systems and working on them for the 2022 for my business. So I'm excited for that. What about yourself, Raphael?
Yeah, I know. I'm excited to meet up with you at some point. You know, these coming weeks to kind of work through those systems as well. Because I'm always trying to work on systems in my business, and there's always room for improvement. So excited to see you implement those as well into your day to day. And as far as my day to day for business is concerned, I've definitely been picking up steam as far as clients that I've been working with. I got a few deals that I'm finalizing here in the next week or two that I'm trying to bring to the finish line. I got several, buyer clients, both investor clients and owner occupant users, or those individuals who are looking to buy buildings for their business use as well. So, a little bit of a bunch of things. So trying to keep busy and keep active. And today's episode was awesome. So I'm really excited to, dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. He's our next door neighbor, pretty much. He's in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're in Louisville, Kentucky. Lee Yoder. He's the founder and CEO of Threefold Real Estate Investing. He spoke to us about his journey between becoming a physical therapist and then how he kind of got led by God to a different avenue, in which that was real estate investing. And he actually managed to start into that while he was into a full-time job. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out for sure about this is everyone out there, he actually did it. So I can't wait for you to listen to how he did do it. And how he's been going through some of the struggles when he's actually scaling his business. And he actually speaks of the runway of assets that he actually had in his savings to help him get going on this journey, and how he was grateful for that. And that actually made him transition, because now he's actually full-time into real estate investing, which is amazing. I'm excited to see where his progress goes. And he kind of gives some advice to his younger self. And the big key word here is networking, that he would give to his younger self. And then he also gives some great tidbits on some books to read if you're in real estate investing. So I can't wait for you guys to take a listen. Is there anything else that you can add, Raphael?
Yeah, no, he just seemed like a really impressive individual, and he dove back into his past and really understood the turning points within his life and really explained what his thought process was in those moments in time. Because a lot of times you feel very isolated and siloed, and you're saying, okay, well, no one else is going through these types of thoughts, when in reality, those individuals who maybe are in a position that you want to be in or aspire to be in, they went through those experiences as well. So he provided some context as to what his thought process was throughout these critical moments within his life. And, I think that's going to be extremely valuable to you all. So, I can't wait for you guys to hear this episode. And also, before we dive into the episode, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review. We've seen significant upticks in our downloads as a result of you guys doing so. We greatly appreciate every single one of you guys for doing so. And it would mean the world to us if you could take a few seconds just to go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, it helps with more and more people listening to the message. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into this episode. All right. Well, hey, Lee, great to see you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to see you this morning. Jeff, actually, we were talking before this podcast episode, before we hopped on. He just got his new mic stand. So, he's pretty excited about that. We're excited to kind of
deploy it. Professional.
Yeah, more a clearer representation of my voice. Let's put it that way. Because the mic was like 2 feet away. It seemed like it's pretty far away for trying to do something like this. So,
Yeah, but we're honored to have you, man. I've been kind of following you on different mediums as far as LinkedIn and other platforms is concerned, and you're just doing a bunch of cool stuff. So we're really excited to dive in and learn a little bit more about your story. So first off, when we first start meeting with people, we like to learn a little bit more about their backstory. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, I think that would provide some context for our audience.
Yeah, sure. I'm a physical therapist by training. So graduated in 2012 as a physical therapist, did the outpatient thing for a year, which was enjoyable. I liked the work, but I didn't love the schedule. You know, we need to be open until 7 or 7:30. So when you guys get off work, you can come in. And so we were starting our family, and, you know, with young kids, they're in bed by 7:30. So didn't love, you know, missing my daughter and, you know, going to bed. So was kind of looking, you know, what else is there? And so just a year in, I started doing home health physical therapy, where I drive around to people's houses, you know, mostly older people, and sit in their home and do therapy with them. And that was a great job for my family. I mean, I had like tons of flexibility because I got to make my own schedule. I would my company would send me my patients on my phone. I could schedule them whenever I wanted. I mean, within reason. So I could easily, you know, have a day off if I wanted, start whenever I want. And it was just an easy job. I was probably barely working 40 hours, you know, riding around, listening to talk radio or whatever. But the problem for me is, you know, God didn't really create me for a job like that. So after like a year, I was dying inside. I mean, I'm being dramatic, but I just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't challenging. It wasn't fulfilling. And so, you know, at whatever I was, 25 years old, I'm like, I can't do this for a career. I don't even think I can do it for another year. Well, the company I was with, I didn't even really know it at the time, but I actually was working for a startup company as a contract therapist. And this startup company here in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I live, they were actually a staffing company, and they staff therapists. Well, they asked me to come in the office and be the clinical director. So I jumped at that opportunity. Quickly, I was doing like half and half, but quickly I was doing no more therapy. I was in the office full time, started moving into more like a director of operations role. I was over therapists in 3 different cities, really like building this division. And now I felt like I found some work that I really enjoyed. I felt like I was kind of entrepreneurial a little bit. I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I was building this division. I was running the numbers. I've always loved numbers, but didn't want to be an engineer. So thought, well, I guess I don't get to use that thing that I love. And now I'm back doing that stuff. So really loving my work, but now it's not so good for the family. So all that flexibility that, you know, I mean, I had so much extra capacity. Like I came home, like just ready to get to work, and, you know, because I felt like I was bored all day or whatever. Now it's like the opposite. Now work is taking everything I've got. You know, I'm thinking about work at home. So I felt like, guys, I really got to see kind of both ends of the spectrum. And this job, while I really enjoyed the work, it just started getting to the point where often it does with climbing the corporate ladder, where it was like, felt like the goalpost kept getting moved, and like, man, what you guys keep selling me on, like working for the startup, and, oh man, we're all going to, you know, become filthy rich. It's like, oh, it's still a couple more years. And then the line in the sand for me was like, I was about ready to take on the title of a director of operations. And I said, well, can I at least keep the schedule I have? Because I left at like 5:15 every day. A lot of people stayed on because there were a lot of recruiters in there. They're straight out of college. They don't have families, you know, so they'd stay till 6:30, 7, because it's, you know, they're all commission. But I would leave and I might work at home, but I didn't stay. And they said, no, if you become director of operations, you got to stay because you're going to be over some of these people. You got to stay till they leave. And I just wasn't willing to do that. We've got 2 young kids now. So decided this wasn't, you know, for me long-term, but it's like, well, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to just do home health physical therapy. And somebody turned me on to real estate. So then I really got the gears turned. I'm like, okay, I'll go back to home health physical therapy, but I'll do real estate on the side. And it just felt like it might be the best of both worlds, where I've got a solid, steady job that pays, you know, plenty, tons of flexibility, but I'm going to be bored and I'm going to have all this margin. Well, I'll do real estate on the side with that. So, end of 2016, that's what I did. I left that corporate job, took a big pay cut, went back to home health physical therapy with the plan of starting a real estate side hustle.
That's amazing, man.
Nice.
And it's kind of interesting to hear that thought process, because you're right. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that are very happy with maintaining that flexible schedule, having, you know, a very consistent expectation of what they're expected to do, and then have the time frame to go back home. But you kind of mentioned that piece regarding entrepreneurship. And I feel like a lot of people who listen to this podcast have that type of, thought process in their mind where they're saying, there's something more out there for me, and there's something that I can build for myself and my family, and build some either form of generational wealth, or really just build something for myself. Because I feel like all of us innately are entrepreneurs. I mean, it was only a couple hundred years ago where, everyone had to be an entrepreneur. You
Sure.
apprenticed under someone else, you were a cobbler, you apprenticed under someone else, and then you started your own shop. So I feel like we're kind of inherently wired to be entrepreneurs, and it's great to hear that thought process for you, because it was somewhat similar for me back when I was looking to figure out what I wanted to do with my life as well. So
I like how you said that you're trying to keep that flexibility for your family. I got 2 kids as well, and so being an entrepreneur myself, that definitely helps in the home life with flexibility and everything. You kind of seem pretty similar there, Lee, that you got into a job with someone, and that entrepreneur spirit kicked in, and you're like, whoa, that's where my calling is. God's calling me over here to do this. And I know that you said that you started getting into real estate, but I kind of want to know, like, what got you interested in commercial real estate? Was there a certain project? Like, can you just elaborate on that for us?
Yeah. So when I got interested in real estate and left a corporate job, I'm doing home health. So I'm, again, driving around, tons of time to listen. So listening to podcasts, not your guys back then, but much like what you guys are doing now with the podcast. And, just hearing from people and like identifying with people and learning. And so before I even got started, I felt like, I think commercial, real estate, specifically multifamily, buying apartments, I think that's the way to go. So I had that in my mind, but I still started with a flip, so many people do. And it just felt like a bite-sized piece. My wife is very risk adverse, where I'm like a gambler. So, you've got to come to, some agreement here. So we did a flip, and guys, just, one flip was all it took to realize flipping is not investing. Flipping is another job. And it was like this perfect picture. I felt like God set it up this way, where like I took like a 30% pay cut when I went back to home health, but had so much more time, like so many benefits. But then I added a flip on top of that job. So yes, it wasn't a real busy job, but doing a flip on top of it made it busy. And I pretty much made back what I lost with that flip. So it was like this perfect picture of, I just did 2 jobs, to make up for one really busy job. And then when I was done with the flip, it was like, it's over. I don't have anything. I don't own anything. So, because I'm listening to podcasts and educating myself while I'm doing this, and then I experience it, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do that again, because that's not investing. That's not, and it wasn't the dream I sold my wife on. I sold my wife on this passive income and residual income, and we're going to own, and our renters are going to pay us and pay off, and then you do a flip and it's gone. It's like, she's like, that was like miserable. That was like you being back at the corporate world, and we made money, but like, now what? So that, the education and that kind of experience. Next, we did a duplex, and we basically flipped that, but we did have renters for a little bit. So just even a few months of experiencing, hey, every month our income is more than our expenses. And so we make money. And as long as we own this property, if we can keep it full, that's going to be the case. So that's what we're looking for. So education. And then our first couple experiences was like, let's go commercial. And so our third one was a 16 unit. So if that answers your question.
Nice. eight times what you did before. That's awesome.
Or,
Yeah. And it's great to hear you see that as well. I mean, I started my investing journey with a fourplex and a house hack. So my fiance and I, we bought a fourplex, and I lived in one of the units and rented out the other 3. And that's actually what enabled me to transition from what I was doing before. I was an engineer actually by trade in the software space, and, being able to cut out those expenses helped immensely as I was transitioning. Now I'm in the commercial brokerage space. And, the first 2 years in the brokerage business are brutal. I mean, you're making almost nothing, and then you build up your business. And now I'm, coming into my 3rd year, and it's starting to pick up as well. So I trace back the ability to transition to what I'm doing today to that fourplex. If it wasn't for that fourplex, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did and felt comfortable doing so. So, it's great to hear, that thought process for you, because it was very similar in my sense as well. So.
Sure.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask, and this is something that's pretty common amongst a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, just to give you some context and flavor of who listens to this, we have, commercial brokers, lenders, lawyers, really anyone who's interested in the commercial real estate business. And a lot of them have full-time jobs. And you had mentioned how you had a full-time job and you started along your investing career. How was that for you? And I know you had some flexibility, but it's still a lot of responsibility. I mean, you're working, 30 to 40 hours a week, and now you have another full-time job on the side. How did you balance those responsibilities while also having the family at home with young kids?
Yeah, good question. I mean, for me, it was about partnering, and specifically with a property management company. That was another thing that kept driving me toward, commercial. So a duplex, I could have had somebody manage it for me, but it doesn't make as much sense financially, the smaller you are, and the more your properties are spread out. The bigger you go, property management just makes more sense. It's a cost that you can swallow, and usually it's less because it's easier for them to manage. It's more units. They're going to make more money off of, all these things. So that was pushing me toward that. Whereas, just even having the duplex, it was actually very easy to manage. It was in my hometown, in the town we live in, higher end, so great residents, but it still was like, it's just this extra little job. So as I'm thinking about scaling, I'm like, as long as I'm managing my own properties, I'm creating another job for myself. But if I'm just an asset manager, still creating another job for myself, but just as an asset manager, not a property manager. And that's very different. I mean, we're talking way different scale, hours per week, potentially as an asset manager, whereas hours and hours and hours per day and night as a property manager, right? So that was big for me. So, again, my third one was a 16 unit, and I brought in property management right away. And I just saw the benefits of that. I got some referrals, and so I was, able to get a good property management company, which I know is not always easy. So, maybe I was blessed that way, and through referrals got a good one. But, they came in and they're managing the property. So day to day, you don't have a lot to do unless you want to manage some of the CapEx projects like I did, which again, because I had extra time. So it was where I could just work on it as I wanted. I could be as involved as I wanted to be involved. If I would have been less involved, I would have paid my property manager maybe to do those CapEx projects and be the GC for that. So that's where you can kind of control it a little bit, because the property management company is the one that's going to run it. And you've got to be managing the manager and being a good asset manager and things like that. But you can really control it when somebody else is managing the property for you, in my opinion. And that's really how it played out for me. So I could be as involved as I wanted to, as much time as I had, I could use that time. But if I didn't, the property manager is going to keep the operations going.
Definitely. No. And I value the sense that you leverage other people's time and talents. And that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily do early on. And I think that's, again, it's not a good thing. And this is something that I've dealt with a lot of times, especially as someone who's, similar to you, I imagine, like an A-type personality. You like to put your hands on things. You like to control things and make sure things go well. But in reality, if you assign responsibility to someone else to be able to help you in some capacity, whether that's in the property management space. I know Jeff and we talked. I actually recently hired a virtual assistant who's been helping me with a bunch of stuff on the admin side, and also like this podcast, coordinating the podcast guests, sitting, editing all the videos, and then uploading everything to Apple Podcasts, et cetera. And I can't tell you what the time savings has been for me compared to the actual payment of what I'm paying her. And again, she is an all-star. And obviously that takes some time on the front end to make sure you find someone who's a good fit. But once you've expended that initial time to be able to do that, I mean, I think the cost savings from both time and monetary perspective are immense. And so, I think that what you did was very smart. And I think more people need to do that instead of trying to take on everything and try to control things that they probably shouldn't be controlling. So.
Absolutely. I just wanted to so you said you had 3 properties, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
That was our third one.
Third one. Oh, okay.
Was our third one.
Okay. Well, I actually want to go back to your first one, the acquisition of that, and what were some of the struggles, the difficulties that you faced acquiring that property? Can you kind of walk us through if there was any, or? Yeah.
Well, so we bought it on an online auction. And then the duplex, we actually got it at a county auction. So the biggest part, you got to pay all cash. And then, when you do the rehab, we paid all cash for that. We didn't use any financing. So that was the biggest struggle. We were in a position, we bought our house in 2012, and this was 2017. So, you can imagine we had equity in our house, just like everybody else. So we were able to use a big HELOC to help with that. And then actually, my in-laws got involved and they wanted to be a part of it and, lend us some money on it. So not everybody can do that. But if you've got a good deal, you're always going to find people probably that if you can get it in community, you're going to find people that are willing to lend you money for a piece of that deal. So that was the biggest struggle. I mean, it's funny to say now, but like in 2017, things were hot too. I mean, it's just nowhere compared to what it is today. But it was still hard to find a good deal. Real estate was still hot back then. So it was hard. And finally, I just pushed in. I mean, I told my wife that my top dollar for that house was, I think I told her it was 60 and I bought it for 70. So, I just couldn't wait any longer. I'm like, I'm getting in, come hell or high water. We're jumping in. I just pushed into it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. And I mean, that jump is the biggest click for you. And it's hard. I mean, when I bought that fourplex, it was the most money I've ever spent in my life. And when you're looking at that bill and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna have to come up with this amount of money that I've spent, however long saving up for, it can be very scary. But luckily in the real estate space, I mean, it's backed by a physical asset. So even if God forbid something terrible happens, like you're not going to lose everything, or at least if you lose your everything, it's just going to be what you probably have invested in it. So it's a little bit easier to swallow on that front. One thing I wanted to kind of touch on too is maybe that, you've done your first 2 deals and now you're looking at 16. I mean, that's a different, as you look to scale the units that you're dealing with, there's also another mindset shift. So how was that mindset shift for you? I know you kind of mentioned how you wanted to get to that next level as far as the units were concerned, but can you kind of talk to us about, actually getting yourself to actually pull the trigger on that? Because there's plenty of people out there too that, they own 4, 5, 6 rentals and then they just never pull the trigger on saying, let me just make an offer or move forward with this 32 unit property.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that felt like such a big hurdle. That just real quick, I don't know if I missed it, but like just to catch you guys up, we bought 188 units last year. So this 16 unit was in 2019. We got a 16, an 8, and a 10. But I just say that because, the latest one we closed on was a 96 unit this past December, but that was easier than doing the 16 unit because that felt like, when you're buying a house to flip, we knew some people that were flipping. That's not that crazy to buy another. I mean, it still felt like a really, again, to your point, Raphael, it's really hard to get started. So it was a big hurdle just to jump in on a single family, but it doesn't seem that crazy. Then the duplex, it was like, not that much different. When you're buying an apartment building, I mean, yes, it's only 16. It's not like the apartment buildings that people live in, but it's still an apartment building. And we didn't know anybody that owned an apartment building. So, I mean, I know my wife kept saying that, like, people don't do this. And I'm like, they actually do. We just don't know any of them, right? Like I'm listening, unless they're all lying on these podcasts and these books that they're writing, like people actually, and we can do it supposedly. So it was a huge hurdle. I'll tell you, short answer to your question there, Raphael, is getting a mentor. That was the biggest thing. I am not against paying for coaching. I was blessed to not have to, just because our local RIA here in Cincinnati is pretty strong. And there was a guy leading an apartment focus group for the RIA. And I started going to that. And that guy, he had done like one of the coaching programs and was still paying for it. So it was like he was passing it on to all of us for free. And so he was teaching us how to underwrite. He was teaching us the different steps. Here, you got to, submit an LOI. That's kind of your negotiating. Then you do the purchase contract, the sales agreement. You go through that. You do an inspection, just it gets you more comfortable. But the main thing is teaching you how to underwrite. You've got to learn to underwrite. It's very different than buying a house or even a duplex, probably even a quad, right? To some degree, Raphael. So it's just different. The lending's different, obviously. So that's what it was. And that mentor was more than just a teacher, because when I had a property, I was like, hey, Mark, I think I want to offer on this. He's like, yep. I'm like, okay, can you let me use your LOI? Yeah, here it is. Just fill this out, send it in. Okay, Mark, they came back. They're renegotiating. I can't pay that. He's like, just stay with your price. Okay. And then they accepted our price. And it's like, all right, we're doing the inspection. Mark comes with me. So he was a really good mentor. I ended up giving him 10% of that deal. And to me, like, you can't always get this. That's why I say I'm not against paying for coaching, but that's the way to pay for coaching, because Mark got paid about $20,000, but it's not until I brought that property full cycle, So, hey, once Mark helped me make a bunch of money, then I paid Mark good money. And I was thrilled to be able to do that for him. But that's the key, man. If you can get, a mentor, a coach, somebody else that's done it already, that's going to partner with you, that's the key, in my opinion. It's hard to do it otherwise.
Oh yeah, I mean, mentors for me over the years, different aspects of my life and stuff. Getting a mentor it's life changing. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
they've already had all the ups and downs, the experiences, and worked through all that. So it's like, hey, they're telling you all the do's and don'ts already. I mean, they're handing you the roadmap. It's just, follow this road and take the left up here around the oak tree. That they're just giving you that. So yeah, I love that you said the mentor piece was where kind of got you started and got rid of your fears, right? That's a lot. I think a lot of people on here that's listening that want to jump in is that fear. I think if you look for a mentor or just even look for advice, I think that was going to help you overcome that fear and help you jump into the deep end and start swimming. So.
Yep.
Yeah. That fear piece is, I think, the biggest hurdle, because a lot of times it's just, you don't know what you don't know. Right. So there's a big unknown out there. And a lot of times it's like, I don't even know what questions to ask. I don't really know what to do. And because of that, a lot of people get in their own way and they say, okay, well, maybe it's just not meant for me. But in reality, it is. It's just, you got to find the right individual or entity or whatever that can kind of guide you along that path and lower the barrier to be able to get you across the finish line. And I commend you on the RIA. I mean, we got a pretty strong RIA. We're just an hour and a half away from you in Louisville, Kentucky. And we got a pretty strong RIA here too. So there's a lot of mentors. And the cool thing about the real estate community in general is that people are very much, I don't know why it is, but the industry itself is a very abundance driven mindset industry. And so there's so many people out there that are willing to just talk to you and help you out. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've reached out to in the past that, I've had questions about certain things and they're like, oh yeah, let's just go grab coffee, or, let's hop on a call and whatever. So, I think that don't get in your own way. Like, break down what you think you need to do, reach out to people that you think are already in a position that you're interested in being in, and then just kind of start building some relationship with them. And you'll be surprised with how many people take you up on that offer. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And what I'd say, guys, that 16 unit, again, just felt like the highest mountain I could ever climb. It just felt insurmountable. But for Mark, it was no big deal. Mark he had only done a few deals. He didn't own thousands of units, but he had done a few. So this was just another one for him. So for him, it wasn't that big of a deal. So he kind of passed on that confidence to me and I leaned on his confidence. And then bringing on a property manager, it's like, what are we going to do when we actually take over this property? Nothing. The property manager is going to do it. And for them, 16 units, they're managing 1,000 in this city. Yeah. So 16 units they're like, yeah, Lee, it's walk in the park. Here's what we'll do. We'll come out on day one, put up a piece of paper on everybody's door, knock on the door, try to meet them. But on the paper, we meet them, we send them an email, and it's going to tell them how to get us paid. And that's it. And tell them where to send their maintenance requests. Okay. So suddenly it's not that scary because the people that are working with me have done it and it's not scary for them. So you just lean on them.
That's awesome, man. Great advice. So now let's take it from the 16 units to today where, you guys have acquired hundreds of units. What were the biggest struggles you faced along the way? You've already kind of overcome that initial hurdle of fear, and now you've gotten across the finish line. You realize, oh, that's really not that bad. But now there's different problems that arise, because anytime you go to another level, there's inherently going to be new problems. So, and we're in the business of solving those problems and then moving to the next level. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you over the last maybe 2 years?
Yeah, sure. I would say, another reason a lot of people like to go bigger, would rather buy a 100-unit apartment building as compared to a 10-unit apartment building, is because there's not that many differences. You have to raise more money. I would say that's been the biggest difference. We on the 16-unit, the 8-unit, and the 10-unit, I brought in 1 or 2 partners on each of those. We did a joint venture. It's pretty simple, and so that can be a great space for you. You don't involve the SEC attorneys. You just throw up an operating agreement, for a couple $100. You can put it together. You can put it together however you want. And it's just really simple. Everybody signs on the loan. The banks like that. It's easy to get in and out of and things like that. When you go bigger, you have to raise a lot more money. You get the SEC involved. You've got private placement memorandums, operating agreements, subscription agreements. Everybody's got to fill all that stuff out. It's a ton more paperwork. It costs more. And then you just have investors to keep up with and things like that. But as far as operating the property, we use the same property management company. And again, it's easier to manage a bigger property. It makes more financial sense for them. So they like it better. So as far as running the property, operating it, not that much of a difference. I would just say, the numbers are bigger. So where you're like, yeah, having like $50,000 on hand for a 16 unit, that sounds like plenty. Well, yeah, it is. But like, for a 100 unit, it might be $100,000. And sometimes you might think, oh, 50 still sounds good or something. So I don't know, you can kind of run into that where sometimes scale, it's hard to imagine scale. The perfect example is we went to, this is a random story, but I got to tell it to you. We were going to change out the doorknobs for our 47 unit apartment building. I've changed out tons of doorknobs, my own house, the flips we've done, stuff like that. And I thought me and my partner could just do it. And I mean, 47, and there was a separate one for the deadbolt and the door. So it was actually, 94 or whatever. We ended up finishing, we actually weren't totally done at 11:30 at night. Luckily, there's some crazy people at that apartment building that stay up really late, but the scale can kind of get you. I guess, I'm getting long-winded here, Raphael, but to answer your question, there's not that many differences other than, you've got to raise a lot more money. So that's very different because you have to start doing some things now to attract capital. You probably don't have just enough family to raise, and our last one was $1.65 million. So we're really having to broaden our community of investors. So that takes some doing. You might need a podcast, you might need a website, you might need to, market on social media. That's the biggest difference, is raising the money and then all the paperwork and getting the SEC attorneys involved and things like that. Operating the property, not too much different.
Oh, for sure. Could you tell us a little bit about that piece? I'm kind of interested because that's something that I'm sure a lot of people out there are interested in, is the once you get past the family and friends money, and now you're starting to raise capital from people who really you don't know. I mean,
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that process has been for you and maybe some of the things that you've done to be able to, attract that type of capital?
Yeah. So we did a 45 unit at the beginning of 2021, and that was still family and friends. We only had to raise $550,000 for that one. But then we did a 47 unit. We had a big CapEx project. We didn't get as high LTV. So we needed to raise 1.3 million on that one. So that was a big raise for us. We were assuming a Freddie Mac loan. So they have strict requirements on net worth and liquidity. And my partner and I did not meet those. So we actually brought Mark back in, my mentor, and a big part of the RIA in Cincinnati. And he helped us raise money. So that was big because, I'm part of the RIA. Some people know me there, but they don't know me like they know Mark, who's been running this. So Mark, not only did he bring in some investors, because he probably raised about 300 of the 1.3, but even some of the people that I was talking to, just knowing that Mark was in on the deal really helped us. So that allowed us to expand that community. But even now, I'd had the 16, the 8, and 10 that sold. And so some of the investors with me on that had started talking to people. Even the 45 unit that we just did a few months earlier, they had started talking to some people. So we saw a little bit of growth, but really bringing Mark in and bringing the RIA in helped on the second one. By the third one that we did, the 96 unit that we closed on in December, that's when we really started seeing some organic growth of people telling other people in the RIA telling other people in the RIA. We've had a lot of repeat investors as well. So that's kind of snowballed. But then I've been doing a podcast as well and doing some social media it was like a year and a half by the time we were closing on that 96 unit. And that's about how long it's taken. But I've started to see, I've actually had some people come in from posts that I've put up or from podcasts, hearing me on a podcast. So it wasn't really until that third one. And now we have a track record, right? I mean,
oh, sure.
When we're doing the first one, we don't even have a track record. So only your family and friends are going to buy in on that, not necessarily, but probably, for us, that was the case. They're the only people that trust us, without a track record. So now we've got a track record. I've been doing the podcast. I've been doing social media. It's starting to take effect, to take hold. So we've seen some people coming in on that. And then some organic growth within our investors. So it's kind of a lot of different things. Honestly, when I was getting started, I read Joe Fairless's book, The Best Ever Apartment Syndication book. And there's a lot of things you can do in that, starting a podcast is one. And he kind of, it's a great textbook. And I'm reading through that. I'm like, okay, I want to do all these things. And I started doing all of them. And it's like, okay, when's the money going to start rolling in? And, when I talk to some guys that have been doing it for a decade, they're like, Lee, over the next few years, it's just going to start running. I'm like, I don't want to wait a few years, but that is, I think, the real answer, unfortunately. Now, again, you can partner with other capital raisers. There's a lot of different things you can do to scale faster, but that organic growth of people trusting, you don't have a track record when you're getting started. So you're not going to just bring in the money unless you just, already have that network. But Yeah, it's been a slow and steady process, guys, with, the community just growing organically. And then finally, year and a half, gosh, I'm coming up on 2 years now of doing the podcast and the social media. People have, they'll watch you for a long time and see if you're going to stick with it. And then they finally want to jump on board your third or fourth project.
Oh, for sure. No, I mean, there's so much value provided there. And I think we can unravel a few of those things. Is one thing being that everything in life takes time. There's this book that I always recommend, the Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Love it.
Which is a phenomenal. I mean, it was a game-changing book. I read it back when I was 23, and it's really changed my life and how I approach my day-to-day. And it's really the idea of small, consistent, positive action every day adds up to huge results in a relatively short period of time. Relatively short period of time meaning 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. Yeah. But the cool thing about it too, which is something that you mentioned, is once that ball gets rolling, it's hard to stop. I mean, essentially, it's like a train going down the tracks, and you put a brick wall in front of it, it's going to run right through that brick wall. And so, I think is a phenomenal way to approach life in general. And then also the piece of bringing someone in who has that experience. Again, just associating with people who have that track record of success and working with them in some capacity. I mean, I've done it in the brokerage space with my brokerage. A big reason why I joined my brokerage is because of the reputation of the people that are affiliated with the organization. That in and of itself somewhat rubs off on you when you start meeting with people that own these commercial properties. It makes a big difference. And the connections and network that they have, you can leverage now into getting whatever opportunities that you're looking for as well. So, those are just two of the pieces of information that I wanted to kind of further elaborate for the audience so that they understand that, utilizing those two strategies could be very, very beneficial for you over a longer period of time is, I guess, the big thing.
Yep. I agree. I recommend that book all the time as well, Raphael. I love that book. And it's so true. Like you said, in life, but certainly apartment buildings. So true.
So, you just recently transitioned away from your full-time job, correct?
Yeah. It was December of 2020. Yeah. So like a year and a half ago. Yep.
Well, congrats, man. That is amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, and on that note, I actually want to what was your thought process in that, and how has the transition been for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love it. I love doing real estate every day. I'm really passionate about it. So I love it. I love being an entrepreneur. There's some struggles with it, but I love it. And my wife loves it. We love it as a family. But financially it was difficult, and it's still difficult. I like telling the story because we went about it a little bit different way. I guess, again, I changed the plan on my wife, because it was just taking too long. So, what you're supposed to do is you buy enough rentals to where the income from your rental properties equals, whether it either replaces your income or at least it'll cover your expenses, right? So you might be making 100, but you say, yeah, but our expenses are 60 a year. So if I can just get to 60. And so that was my goal, was like, if I can just get to 60, well, that was taking too long. I didn't want to wait too long. So we had the 16, the 8, and the 10. Those were big value add projects, and I started selling them before we got them all done. But just for some easy numbers, I just like to throw these numbers out, just give people an idea. If I would have held on to all of those, I'd had 34 units. I owned 50 to 55% of each of them. My annual income probably would have been like right around 30, maybe 35 as rents went up, but 30, 35. So I was like halfway there. So I'm like, I got to do this all over again to get to my number. And maybe that would have been the right choice, but also the market went crazy, right? So, we're rolling into 2020, and no, I certainly didn't guess that COVID and shutting down the world would be awesome for real estate, but it was. So coming into the fall of 2020, I'm like realizing how much equity's there. And I'm thinking I can, I'm trying to get to 60 a year, but if I sell all 3 of these, I'll have that, and again, I want to share all the numbers, but I would have had like a few years of a runway. So that's what we did. So we sold all 3 of those. And now we've got this like 3 or 4 year runway of a bunch of money, sitting in our savings account that can pay for our expenses, while now we go and try to get this going. And now I'm after that same goal of buying rentals, and the rental income, the residual income coming off of those is going to replace my expenses. If I can't get there, I'll have to go back to being a physical therapist maybe for a little bit, but I've got a long runway to do that. But I'll tell you, kind of answer your question a little bit, Jeff, like it's still unnerving. I mean, I'll say, like, if you have $50,000 in your savings account, maybe if it's even 25, but every month it goes up, that may feel better than having $200,000 in your savings account, but every month it goes down. And that's kind of the situation we're in. Like, we've got a nice long runway, but it goes down all the time. Now, last year it didn't, because we closed on 3 properties and we take an acquisition fee. So, it went up last year, and last year was a great year. But, that's the thing about being an entrepreneur. It doesn't mean anything for this year. This year we might just keep dwindling through our savings if we don't buy anything. So it's been great. I love it. My wife loves it. It's the life we hoped for and prayed for our family. But we're not there yet. We're not financially independent yet. So it's still, we're still taking some risks. It's still scary at times, especially for her. Again, I'm a gambler, so I like it. But yeah, that's kind of the situation we're still in.
Oh, for sure. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
I was just going to say on that, entrepreneur it's an up and down roller coaster, especially when it comes to your bank account. 2020, I'm a commercial GC and investor. Me and Raphael have a Fidelity Development together, and we're in real estate. But 2020, I was heavily in the restaurant market. So you can obviously see what happened with me, like completely closed down, where all these projects and restaurant owners are like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to spend $150,000 remodeling my restaurant when I don't know when the doors are going to open back up, So, course, all those cash reserves start going down. I mean, that's the life of an entrepreneur. Raphael actually and I talked about this. Actually, it was like last week, Raphael, just about it. I mean, you got your ups and downs, and especially in the early stages. So, I don't want people out there to think that, these successful people who's been an entrepreneur for 20 years, that they had it easy, and you're trying to figure out how they did it the easy way. Well, right. I'm here to tell you there is no easy way. You're going to have struggles at the beginning. That's part of it. So, but yeah, anyways.
And I'll even say, there's this book called Set for Life by Scott Trench, who's the Bigger Pockets CEO. And I remember reading that before, making the transition. And one of the things they talk about is building that financial runway, because it allows you the flexibility to do something different if you so choose. So for example, like when I was going through the logic of saying, okay, whether or not I wanted to maintain in the software business or jump into the commercial brokerage space, I looked and said, okay, what are your expenses? What type of runway do you have? And do you feel comfortable taking that type of risk? And so in my case, I had about a year of a runway, a year and a half of a runway, to where if I didn't make any money for a year and a half, I would be in good shape as far as my savings were concerned. And so I deemed that appropriate of a risk and said, okay, I could make, and again, I was making a lot of money in the other business as well. So don't get me wrong, but I knew the potential and said, okay, even if I don't make any money the first year, maybe a little bit money the second year, the upper potential when you're dealing in the brokerage space, in particular in commercial real estate, I was looking at people that were making, 7 figures, high 6 figures, pushing 7 figures. And so it said, okay, when I compare the two outcomes, this is the one I prefer to take. And so having that runway, and my opinion is the game changer right there. And so I think you're doing the right thing as far as, taking that risk, because I'm pretty confident that given the fact you've already built out these systems and you're following a process, I believe you're going to be in a much better position 4 years from now than you are today if you really stick at it. So
yeah, I agree.
That's awesome, man. So one thing I wanted to ask you was pertaining to what advice would you give your younger self? This is one of the questions we like to ask people because, sometimes it's easier. 2020, it's better to see 2020 hindsight, right? You kind of look in the past and say, man, I wish I would have done something differently as it pertains. And it doesn't necessarily have to be towards real estate, but if you could provide some advice as far as, what advice you would give to your younger self to be able to, maybe move you on a different trajectory or whatever else.
Yeah, I think it would just be to network more often and earlier. I mean, I can go all the way back to high school. Again, I really like numbers. I always have. So when you're in high school, people are like, well, just go be an engineer then. Oh, okay. Like, so I have one option if I like numbers, right? So luckily my mom though was like, well, you should go job shadow some engineers. I think that's awesome advice. And I went and did it. And I was like, this looks really boring. I don't want to do this. So I'm glad she did that. I wish I would have done it like 100 more times, because I ended up going, okay, I don't want to do that. Well, I like people, so I'll be a doctor. So I go to college to be a doctor. And, I met my wife and I joked that I would be a doctor if it weren't for my wife, because she started going, "Are you sure you want to be a doctor?" I'm like, "No, but what else would I do?" And she's like, "Most people that become a doctor, like they're sure they want to be a doctor. Like you just seem like you're doing it because you don't know what else to do." And I'm like, "You might be right." So I end up like, hey, let me do a toned down version of a doctor. I'll become a doctor of physical therapy. And that's literally how I did it. And then, you get into it and it's like, I don't even think this is what I want to do. And then finally I, get around a job, which has shown me some other stuff. So I just wish I would have had that back then. I mean, if I'd have gotten around somebody that was doing real estate in high school, I just know I would have been like, this is for me. This is what I want to do. The numbers that are, I love the numbers of it and all that. So, and then once I got into real estate, again, I don't know, maybe I still would have done the flip, but the more I would have been around people that were doing the things I knew I wanted to eventually do, I probably would have gotten into it even quicker, things like that. So, and some people stick around and do flips for years and then they finally meet somebody. So the more you network and just get around people, not only do they help you do things, but they're going to help you see what you want to do, so you're not messing around with something that's not really what you want to do. So I would just tell myself to network a lot more.
For sure. Yeah. You just get different perspectives from people in different walks of life. And then, those perspectives that you garner now affect your decision-making framework. And as you make those decisions going forward, now you have added layers on top of that decision-making framework to make future and better decisions. And one thing I will say though, regarding, maybe not knowing exactly what you wanted to do, because I was the same as you. Like I love math and science, and everyone's like, you should be an engineer. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll do engineering. And that's what I did. But one of the cool things about what I did, and again, I loved what I did before as far as the intellectual stimulation, but it just didn't lend itself well to my personality and my wanting to be around people on a regular basis and build those types of relationships. And so, but one thing I will say it's done for me is enabled me to solve problems from an engineering standpoint, like breaking down problems into component parts and then solving. And I'm sure on your side, from the physical therapy side, there's a lot of the way you think and the way you operate has probably been impacted by your previous career. And I'm sure it's served you in some capacity with your current investing as well. So, I'm sure there's certain things.
No, good point, Raphael. Yeah, it's a good point.
Definitely.
We'll see that you have some books back there, Lee. And so that leads me to the next question is, what is one of the most impactful books that's kind of led you to where you are now, or it just, I'd like to kind of, it could be back, right out of high school, you read a book and, oh, now that's what makes me want to do this, or, yeah. So
good question. I mean, the most impactful book for me on my life is the Bible. And that's the foundation that I built everything on. Once I got into real estate, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, just kind of that light bulb moment that so many people have, that it was like, there's a whole different game that some other people are playing. There's a whole, like, not just, because to me, when you're an employee, you're playing the same game 95% of people are playing, and you're just trying to play it better. And that's fine. But to your point, like Raphael, you were saying, so many of us are entrepreneurs, and suddenly you read Rich Dad and you're like, okay, I can go play a whole different game if I want to. So that was huge. I think everybody should read that. And granted, I did a podcast with my wife because she read it and she was like, I identify with the poor dad. I'm like, wow. I'm like, you just failed. You got it wrong. I don't know. Read it again. But it's not for everybody, but for the people that it speaks to, it's like, my gosh, I got to go this route. Like for me, it was like, it's only a matter of time before I do this, because it opened my eyes. I took the red pill or whatever. Like I've got to get into it. So I'd start there. You stole my thunder, Raphael. I always recommend The Compound Effect. That book spoke so much to me because I really struggle with that. I mean, I'm probably a little more built, and a lot of us are, where like flipping's great because it's so quick and you get to see the results, and then you get the money, and then you just do it again. And so like, it's quick, but you're not really building anything. And that's why, I guess just a lot of the things that are really worthwhile and that can really build wealth, they just take time. And that's what the compound effect kind of teaches you. It's just a great example in the book. They say, would you rather have, $2 million right now, or if I give you a penny today and then give you 2 pennies tomorrow and 4 pennies the next day, and I'll do that for 30 days. And you just can't imagine that collecting pennies is going to catch up to $2 million, but I forget what the number is, but it's something like $3 million after 30 days. And it just blows your mind. And the real key, I think what's really eye opening is that even after like 20 days, you still have you have like $1,000. It's still nothing. So you're still way behind the guy that got 2 million, the guy that's out there flipping like, dude, I'm already making thousands of bucks. What are you doing trying to buy an apartment building? You haven't done anything. But then all of a sudden you buy a 100 unit apartment building and you've just skyrocketed. And then, the law of the first deal that some people talk about, you buy another one. So that book is really powerful. As far as real estate books go, there's the ABCs of Real Estate Investing by Ken McElroy is good. I mentioned the one by Joe Fairless. If you really want to be a syndicator, I'd read that. If you just want to buy some small multis, I wouldn't read that one. That's like if you really want to build a business. I mean, Joe Fairless has built an incredible business, and I don't really aspire to build one quite as big as him, but he lays out the roadmap. So if you want to build a business, that's a good one. And then the Complete Guide to Buying and Selling Apartment Buildings by Burgess, I think the last name is. That's a really good one too.
Man, you give a whole library. That's awesome. No, we appreciate that. And I think Rich Dad Poor Dad's probably the most recommended book that we have on the podcast. It really is a mindset shift. And I feel like a lot of things in life are all about mindset. It's like, how do you approach your day-to-day life such that in the future, you're better off than you were in the past? And I think all those books that you recommended, are going to help people make that shift because, if you start today, 20 years from now, it's going to be a different story. So That's awesome, man.
I agree.
So Lee, we greatly appreciate your time. We know you're busy. It's a very active market right now, trying to find opportunities within the multifamily space. So we do greatly appreciate your time. One thing we would like to ask all our guests is to contribute something to what we call the commercial real estate treasure chest. It's a repository of resources that we make available to our audience. And usually some of our, guests contribute like helpful PDFs or Excel sheets, eBooks, etc. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. What are you willing to contribute today?
Yeah, I've got an ebook that's free that I came up with. It's called 5 Steps to Passive Income for the Full-Time Dad. It's for moms too, but my partner and I are both dads, and we're passionate about using real estate to maybe even be a better dad. And what I mean by that is like real estate can be a powerful wealth generating tool. It can produce passive income today and build wealth for tomorrow. So that can be powerful for dads, because if you can put your money to work for you, then maybe you don't have to trade so much time for money. I think a lot of people, again, back to that, changing your mindset and Rich Dad, kind of opening your eyes to a different way. Most people think, if I want to make more money so that I can send my kids to a private school, or so that we can take some really memorable vacations, it's like I've got to just put in more time. I've got to take the promotion. Well, if you could save up some money and put it into real estate, even as a passive investor, we've been talking about active investing, but even if you get in passively and put your money to work for you, the difference with real estate a lot of times is it can start producing money today. I mean, most syndications like ours pay out quarterly, maybe even monthly. So maybe you put your money to work for you, and that extra money, that's what allows you to send your kids to private school instead of spending more time away from home. So now you can provide for your family financially, but not be away from home more and miss even more of your kids growing up and things like that. So we're passionate about that. And that's why we wrote the ebook. And I'd be happy to contribute that to your guys' wealth of knowledge that you're passing along.
That's awesome, man. No, we would greatly appreciate that. And I know a lot of people will gain some value from that. And it's interesting because I saw, a graphic that showed that if you were to invest, let's say, $50,000 every 2 years with certain, return metrics, if you extrapolate that over a 10-year period, and from a passive standpoint, you can make enough to even replace your full-time income. And I don't know, I don't know what the exact return metrics are, but they kind of illustrated that via the math. And I mean, it can be a super powerful way for you to use your time and talents to, if you're a doctor and you're doing great, keep doing that. But there's opportunities for you to be able to make some extra money that now you can allocate towards, time with your family and spending time in a way that you want to spend time. So that's awesome.
Yep. Right. I agree.
Lee, I really appreciate you coming on. I know that you've taken your time and you've told us your story, which I very much enjoyed, and I know all the listeners will. But if they want to come out and get in contact with you, maybe they want to do an investment with you or ask you something, what was the way that you would like them to do that for you?
Yeah, jumping on our website is probably the easiest way. It's threefoldrei.com. So that's THREEFOLDREI as in real estate investing.com. Our ebook's there, but I'll send it over to you guys as well. But you can sign up through there to get our monthly newsletter and things like that. And then I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn more than anything, just my name, Lee Yoder. So reach out to me there as well.
Definitely. And we'll include all that information in the description. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the description below. And if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format like Apple or Spotify, et cetera, it's going to be in the description below as well. So awesome. Well, Lee, we definitely greatly appreciate your time. If you guys are watching this on a YouTube format, we would greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the YouTube algorithm, ensures more and more people can hear this message. If you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, et cetera, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. We've seen a significant uptick in our downloads as a result of you guys leaving 5-star reviews. So please do so. It helps with the algorithm and ensures that this message spreads and we can get more people into the commercial real estate industry. So thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.